Bibles, bullets, and diplomacy. Now, I bet that's a combination you don't hear very often, and probably not thinking you're going to see here on this channel. But one of the things about Deep Dive is that we cover a lot of things, not just wars in the Middle East or in Europe, but also some events that are happening on the African continent. And I cannot tell you how delighted I am to have with us today an old friend of mine, a pastor from Uganda. His name is Ivan Wandera. And he is, I met him in 2016, actually, when I had gone to Africa on a sort of mission trip, I suppose, doing some things. And he was showing me some of the refugees from the South Sudanese civil war at that time that had already been going on. There was a big refugee camp on the side, and someone, a mutual friend, introduced us together, and just started a delightful relationship between us. That's us back there in 2016, and then this one other when we were actually providing some of the food to some of the refugees, which they helped us procure. Just something I still remember to this day. But Ivan, so glad to have you on the show today. Thanks for coming on.
I'm so delighted to be on the show, Danny. I'm so delighted to be on the show and seeing your face again after very many years.
Yeah, it has been too many years. Well, a couple of times we were close to being able to come back over there, and something always seemed to jump up. And we are definitely going to have to get that fixed because it's been too long just to see you in person. So look forward to doing that soon.
Yeah, it should be fixed. Yeah.
It should be. But listen, the reason why I wanted you to come on today and why I want our audience to see is that we like to highlight what people are doing, especially when things are going good. We talk so many times about the problems and some of the failures of some of our diplomats and our military leaders in different parts of the world and things that are being done that harm people. But when something goes good, that doesn't get much notice. And the story that you had that we talked about not too long ago, I knew as soon as I started hearing the story, this is something we had to get on Deep Dive because it is going to be incredibly interesting just on a human level, but also on seeing what happens on the ground, because we're always worried on this channel about what is ground truth reality and what are the dangers and risks and opportunities. And we're going to be talking about some things here because you're a pastor and you go and you preach the gospel and tell people about Jesus and all that. But there's also some other aspects of your ministry that have very profound direct impacts on people's lives ironically, in the diplomacy area. And so we're going to be talking about some of that too. But first of all, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about the Sudanese civil war, or the South Sudan, rather, civil war that's going on down there. And actually, let me preface it by showing just a clip that kind of captures a taste of what has been going on up to this point.
The government has been fighting these rebels since 2013, when the ethnic war started, just 2 years into the country's independence from Sudan. Both sides have been accused by the United Nations of human rights abuses, but it's government soldiers who have been blamed recently for attacking and killing villagers in some parts of the country. The Sudan People's Liberation Army, SPLA, insists it's fighting bandits.
So now, let me ask you, first of all, if you could kind of characterize how this war, what it even started over, and kind of where it is at the moment.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. Well, this war started way back. The first, basically, the civil war itself started in 2016, and this was soon after the independence, and John Garang and his group had procured independence for South Sudan. When they had a long, protracted war against Sudan in the north. So when they got the independence, and the peace was short-lived, because as soon as they had the independence, then John Garang, the man who was behind driving South Sudan towards independence, died. And when he died, they became a power struggle amongst the ruling party. So at that period of time, they emerged two separate groups that started vying for power. And so, this is where the whole conflict begins, from the civil war itself. And so it begins 2016. And to date, as I speak to you, there's a piece that is really not so holding so strong. The guy that was leading the rebel army, that is Riek Machar. Right now he's in Juba. They signed a kind of a peace treaty, and so he's there, and they are trying to organize for elections. And so basically the whole story begins way back in 2016. And as I speak to you, the peace is not really as it seems to the outside world, because there are still violence going on amongst tribes, ethnic rivalry, and many other things that are happening. And the world is now focused on what's happening in the Middle East and Ukraine. But there's a lot that is happening in South Sudan, and so basically the whole thing erupts in 2016.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, your ministry is actually based in Kampala, Uganda. Is that right?
Yes, that's very right. The ministry is based in Kampala, Uganda.
And as I recall from that time there, it's a good 6-hour car drive up to the border area with South Sudan. Isn't that also right?
Yeah. That is a 6-hour drive, 6 to 7 hour drive to the border with Uganda and South Sudan.
So first of all, just kind of tell me how your ministry expanded from Kampala all the way up to the border there. And because I know at first you were doing something with refugees. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what prompted you to go up there and what your operation started off to be.
Yeah, well, I work with a brother, actually, literally a brother that we grew up together in Sunday school. And he, at some point, he traveled to the US. And so he came back with this vision, and that the Lord had spoken to me concerning, venturing into church planting and evangelizing, reaching the unreached people. And so when he came and we partnered together, we joined hands together, and then we started reaching. We began with northern Uganda, and back then there was a war that was really just coming to a close in northern Uganda between the Ugandan government and a rebel outfit that was known as the Lord's Resistance Army of Joseph Kony. So basically, after that war, we started going there to northern Uganda to plant churches. And when we were in northern Uganda, we realized that actually there was need for us to go into South Sudan. Why? Because we came across a certain brother that spoke to us concerning what was happening, that the people there were totally unreached by the gospel, and that there was a lot that needed to be done, not only with the gospel, but humanitarian and reconciliation and many other things. So we started, it was around, I think, 2014. That's when we first entered Sudan. It was my first journey to South Sudan, and it was terrible because back then it was not, the South Sudan had not yet become a nation. The fighting was still going on. So we went in an area called Nimule to a place called Pageri, and we started doing the work there. We started by evangelizing the villages, and it was terrible. We found ourselves doing evangelism at the same time doing humanitarian work in a way that people really were in a lot of suffering. And so this is how we start going in there. And when we went in there, remember the rebels were still fighting with the government of Bashir, Omar al-Bashir. It was a difficult time because there are times when we had to sleep in the bush, and outside, and sometimes you find yourself on the run. It was a risky venture, but we felt that God was leading us in that direction. And so that's where the story begins with us and South Sudan.
Okay. And you kind of mentioned something about the spiritual condition of the people, and that hadn't been, reached for the gospel, or they haven't even heard really about God in that area. And I just want to play this one short clip because I think this might be endemic of some of the types of people that you encounter in that area, especially coming out of this war. Roll this tape.
We have believed that the spirits of the dead is around with us. So this is why anybody will have to resist. And the protection of the land belongs to the young people. So South Sudan is a country that has been at war with the Sudan for decades. And so every generation grew up in such culture of hostility, aggressiveness.
So when you encounter people that, like he's talked about here, have had generations of violence and war, and they're talking to the spirits of the dead or so, what are the challenges for even providing humanitarian aid, much less actually sharing the idea of God?
Yeah, you see, there's been decades of violence, decades and decades of violence. People have been born in violence. This is all they have known their lives. And the nature of superstition, believing in the spirits of the dead. What I've just seen is actually, this is the reality, is that people believe, they believe in witchcraft. They believe in this, in speaking to the dead. And sometimes it's very difficult. If someone, for example, if someone had a medical condition, their mind, what they'll tell you is that this is a spiritual thing. It's a demonic thing. And you could literally, you'd want to help and probably advise on them getting treatment, but then they will insist that this is an issue that needs a spiritual, spiritual kind of healing or something like that. And you need to understand that I come from a place that I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and I believe that, of course, that Jesus has given me the power to pray for the sick and, handle stuff like that. But there are things that you look at and that this is a medical condition that has to be, treated, or that has to be addressed by medical personnel. But the people keep on insisting that, no, this is not it. This is something that has to be dealt with. I need to probably appease their ancestors or do something like that. So it becomes very difficult. And then you see, for you to reach such people that are bent, that are so deep in their beliefs and cultural systems, it's a very difficult thing. So one of the things that we do is we go through the humanitarian channels, ways of helping here and there, and then slowly by slowly we start introducing the gospel to them and getting them to understand that some of the issues that they're dealing with in their lives are not as per se spiritual, but they are things that need to be addressed by the reflecting and the changing of the way they think about human life, the way they think about life, because for them life is not something that is really, really important. Yeah.
Now, I want to shift gears just a little bit there, kind of with that foundation about how challenging it is and how dangerous it is. One of the things you told me the other day, which really got my attention, was that you said that after a while you felt compelled to go in, not just into northern Uganda, but actually across the border into South Sudan, potentially to plant some churches there and to bring help and the gospel to people who hadn't heard it there. And obviously there's going to be a lot of risk in that because you're out of the confines of your own country here. I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about the process that led up to that, why you felt compelled to go there, and what some of your concerns were before you made your first journey.
Yeah, well, so the whole thing is we were in Germany, and that is near the border of Uganda and South Sudan. It's just it's a few kilometers from that place called Nimule to the border. But so we were doing evangelizing and in northern Uganda, and we were giving out food, because one of the things that we do, we do grow maize and stuff, and then we try to help people. So we had gone to do that, and for me, one of the things that compelled us was the unending stream of violence that had ravaged that country, seeing people, young people, young children, old people that are robbed of life. The value of human life was not there. And for me, the reflection was, I was thinking, what can help to bring an end to the cycle of violence here? And for me, the only thing that I looked at, because this is where I come from, I understood that the gospel is what will bring transformation to this country, the change of the hearts of people and the minds. So it was a very difficult decision for me to make, to go. I remember talking to people and telling them that I'm planning to go on, to South Sudan, and people are asking me, "Are you crazy? Are you tired of living? Do you, love your life?" don't you fear you're gonna die or leave your family or stuff like that? But I felt, the conviction that I did not have to sit back and wait for someone else to come and go and do this. That I had to go. We had to go and do this and take the gospel and do our part in bringing an end to the cycle of violence that had been ravaging that country for decades and decades. So, and that was the first time. And I remember I shared with you when we spoke prior to the show, and I told you that the second time that I do make the trip, I really had the same conflicting thoughts, but inside of me I had this drive, feeling of that if I do not go, then who is going to go? It was like as if I was the only one that was supposed to be going there, me and Henry, that we were the only people that are supposed to be going there. So I thought, and we thought and said, ask Henry, if we don't go, who is gonna go? So we need to go and do whatever we have to go to do. We begin with whatever we can begin with.
Right.
So
okay. So up to that point, so that was your internal struggle, but then you had reached a point to where you have to go. Now, before you get to the next part, I want to show people a clip of this is the world and the environment that you're going into.
When the RSF captured Wad Madani, Sudan's second largest city, last December, it took over the Sudan Army's offices and burned down the city infrastructure, including the National Bank. Hundreds of thousands fled their homes, including Dr. Shakir Yahya of the international humanitarian group CARE.
I was so scared. So yes, I was uncertain what's going to happen to my family, to my kids. This airstrikes, this shelling.
So I put that last clip in there, especially because that fellow there had obviously some of the same concerns that you did. And yet you, as we see in this next little clip here, you went anyway.
Yeah, so this is me walking through Kidepo National Park, going to South Sudan in Chukudum for a mission to reach the unreached people of the Didinga.
Okay, so you're in the ready to go now. You've made the decision. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you mentioned that it's not like there's a nice little highway that you can just drive up in there. You have to get on some motorcycles and go across what is like a couple of 100 kilometers, I think, right? Isn't that what you said?
Yeah.
So pick the story up from there.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. So we meet this guy, and he's called Paul Lotiki. And Paul Lotiki comes from a place called Chukudum in South Sudan. And he comes to us somehow. It was kind of a miracle. He meets us in Kampala, and we sit down and we're having a conversation. And he tells us, I've heard about you guys. I've heard that you guys have been coming to South Sudan to preach the gospel, to reach unreached areas. So I'm here to invite you to my people who are called the Didinga. Now, the Didinga live in an area called Chukudum. In Chukudum is closely to the border of, it's in northeast Uganda, and it's near the border of Uganda, of South Sudan and Kenya. So he tells us, and he tells us, please, I want you to come. So I'm sitting there with Henry, and we are looking at each other, and we tell him, you know what, let's pray about it, and then we'll get back to you. So we prayed about it, and at that particular time, Henry had a journey that he had to go to. So it remained with me. It remained with me. Now, this thing kept on coming in my heart. You need to go. You need to go. You need to go. So remember, I have a family, a young family, and so the conflict begins now. How am I going to explain to my wife that I'm going in this area, this violent area of South Sudan, and taking the gospel there? And so I started, the conflict started, happening in my heart. And at the end of the day, I prayed and asked the Lord, Lord, is this the right path for me? I did not, to tell you, Daniel, I did not at that particular time hear God speak to me that go. But I felt, the struggle. I cannot not go. So I sit down with my wife and I tell her, I did not tell her everything, the clear picture of what I was getting myself into. I told her, I feel I'm compelled to go to this part of South Sudan to take the gospel. And because she knows I am, a preacher of the gospel, she agrees to it. I did not tell her everything. So a day comes, I call Paul Lotik. I tell him, Paul, I think we are coming. So we get in a car, me and another friend of mine, a pastor, a South Sudanese, who lives in a refugee camp right now in Germany called Bosco. So we go with him. We drive from Kampala for over 8 hours. And we are going to this place. So we go and then we sleep in a border town of Uganda. So the next morning, I'm seated there and I'm thinking, I think I'm crazy. You know, I'm really crazy. What am I getting myself into? And so Bosco comes and he calls me. Paul has come. He wants us to go. So we get out of the lodge where we were sleeping and we go. And I sit under this tree before I get on the motorbike to ride towards the border. So I'm conflicted. I'm thinking, what are you getting yourself into? You need to just get back into that vehicle and drive back to Kampala and be safe, you know? So I go and I start praying under that tree and I'm asking, Lord, is this your will for me to go? If it is your will for me to go, speak to me. I need to hear. I need, you know. So I immediately I feel in my mind a thought comes over this scripture in Jeremiah 29:11 that I know the thoughts that I have for you to give you a good future, you know, to give you a good ending, you know, to thoughts not of evil. So when this thought of scripture came to my mind, I rose up. Now, I did not think about the fears that were within. I rose up and I told Bosco, let's go. So we got on the motorbikes. Now, I want you to understand that this place is a remote area. There is no road, like a road network that is proper. It's not there, non-existent. As long as the moment you cross from Uganda to that place, so we ride and then we get to the last border point between Uganda and South Sudan, and I meet a detachment of UPDF soldiers. Those are the soldiers of the Ugandan army, and they call me pastor. They ask me, what do you do? I tell them I'm a pastor, and they ask me, where are you going? So I tell them I'm going to Chukudum, South Sudan. What are you going to do? So I tell them I'm going to preach the gospel there. So they laugh at me. They say, well, we are the last point of civilization here. When you cross that border, you're going to be on your own. But anyway, if you're still adamant on going, come and sign your addresses here, your next of kin, and everyone we can contact in case you do not return. You know, so it was like I was signing a death warrant, you know. So we signed, me and Bosco, we write, of course I wrote my wife's name and her number, then I wrote Henry's name and his number. These are the contacts, people that they would contact in case, you know, I don't make it back. So the fear was in me, but somehow I felt compelled. So what happened is we cross. Now I want you to understand this. We get our passports stamped and they are showing that we have exited Uganda. So we exit and we are riding on motorbikes. I remember I sent you some pictures of that and a video. You know, we are riding on motorbikes and we're going to be riding on motorbikes for over 200 kilometers. And not the Harley Davidson kinds of motorbikes. These are Indian made, you know, hard motorbikes, very hard. You know, they make life difficult. So we cross and we enter South Sudan. And guess what? At the first border point, where you expect to have maybe the police, the border police, maybe immigration officers, there was no one there. It was like we are entering no man's land, you know. And so we enter. And my blood is really, you know, I'm sweating, not because, but I'm nervous now because I'm entering a place and I'm not seeing a house, no sign of human being. So we start riding, and as we are riding like 50 kilometers inland. We come across, this was like a nightmare. We come across a group of young warriors. And when I speak about warriors, I'm not talking about trained soldiers or rebels. These are tribal warriors, you know. So we meet them, and I had stories because initially, before we came, we had got news that prior, like a year before, some priest was killed when he was trying to go in there to do, you know, to evangelize and do the work there. You know, they were killed. These guys were killed. So we meet these guys, and I'm thinking in my mind, well, if Lord, if this is it, then let it be quick. I don't want to suffer with this, you know. If this is it, you know, suddenly they stop us. And these guys were between around the age of 17 and 21, you know, very mean, very mean. You know, I remember they had told me that when you come across them, do not look in their face. So I was trying to look down and not look at them. And you see, God is amazing. I had no idea that God had prepared someone who was a former, you know, leader of these tribal warriors. And this guy was reformed, and he was living in Uganda, and he was a motorbike rider. He was the owner of one of the motorbikes that we hired. He was one of the riders. So I was sitting with him. So these guys come close to him, you know, and they start speaking in a language that I do not understand. And they're speaking, and he's speaking back. And all of a sudden I see them, like, you know, honoring him in a way. So I kept to myself, I kept quiet, I didn't say a word. So all of a sudden, they get out of the way, and they let us pass, and we ride on. And I kept on wondering what has just happened there. So I asked him, his name was Lopedes. So I asked him, I said, Lopedes, tell me what has happened there. You know, he speaks English. So he told me, let me tell you, Pastor, what has just happened there is that if you were not with me, you are going to be killed, and everything that you have was going to be taken from you. So I asked him, so what do they know you? So he just laughed. He said, well, something like that. And then we rode on. And I'm telling you, imagine riding. We were riding with fuel, with gas in small 5-liter jerry cans, because there's no petrol station whatsoever in that place. There's no infrastructure. There's nothing like that. So we were riding with 5-liter jerry cans of gas, petroleum gas, to refuel the motorbikes in case we run out of fuel. So we rode on, and I remember vividly, we passed in an area where a certain tribe called the Lango had raided. They had raided, and I saw dead bodies of women and some men just lying on the road, you know, just lying on the road. And so for me, I was just praying in my heart, and, you know, so we started entering small places where there was a town, and this town was called Kikilai. You know, so we enter the town called Kikilai, and we find that there was a lot of people in this area, this particular area. So I speak to this guy called Paul, our contact in South Sudan, because we were with him. So he takes us to this village in Kikilai, and we meet the local chiefs there. And something interesting happened that I share with you. So we speak to the local chiefs, and we introduce ourselves to them. And let me just take you a little bit backward. As we were riding, we'd come across young children, ages of 14 years, 10-year-olds, having guns, AK-47s, you know, having guns. You can imagine a 14-year-old carrying a gun. This is what we were coming across. So we enter this village, and everyone is armed. You know, I remember I watched a movie called The Wild Wild West many years ago about you know, what was in America, probably in America many centuries back. So this, for me, this was it. This was the whole thing. The place was wild. So we enter this village, and the chiefs come. They take us to the chiefs, and the chiefs ask me, so who are you and what brings you here? So I explain myself to them. I tell them, this is what I do. I'm a preacher of the gospel. And so they are listening, and I tell them I've come to bring good news to your people, to the people in this place, in this village and this region. So they tell me, well, what have you brought for us? I tell them I've brought good news. And they say, no, what else have you brought for us? So I had my clothes that I had gone with for the trip. So because they could not let me speak to the people without me giving them a gift. So I gave them, there were around 4 chiefs. I gave them all my clothes, and I remained with 2 shirts and 1 trouser. So as soon as I'd done that, and Bosco had done that as well, then they allowed us to go in a field and they called the people. Many people came, in probably around 300 people came, because we had to wait and someone would go around the village calling. So they gathered them and we shared the gospel with them. And this is where we planted the first church.
And now let me ask you, so all right, so that's obviously the reason you went there, and now now you've succeeded in the first one, but you also told me that then you took a couple of these warring tribes, not the whole country, but a couple of tribes that were part of in a conflict, and that you helped kind of started to mediate between them at the same time. So apparently they're interested not just in the gospel or what you can give them, but also in help mediation. I wonder if you can explain a little bit of that.
Yeah. So the time came when we were called upon, because you see, these tribal conflicts have been going on for generations, for decades. These tribes raid one another for cattle and dominance. So they had enough. These people, the Didinga chiefs, so they called on us, and we went, and they had organized a peace, like a peace kind of conference. So they called us to be mediators, to mediate between them, the different chiefs of the different tribes. So a big group of people, because this took like 3 days, 3 to 4 days, we were meeting in this one place, in that place, Kikilai, in that town, in the center of Kikilai. We were meeting there. So these people converged, and word was sent out that when they're coming to the meeting place, they should not be coming with weapons and stuff like that. So we had a privilege that the government of South Sudan, that was taking that place, Budi County, they sent some government officials, some chiefs, but we were the people that were at the forefront of reconciliation, bringing, speaking to these people, encouraging them to put an end to raids and to speak to their young men. So we started by sharing with them. We shared with them the gospel, and we told them that, look, this, you guys have been at it for decades. You have been raiding one another for decades. You have been, killing one another, killing young men, children, and for what? For what? For cattle and for dominancy and for whatever. And we told them, look, you are killing your brothers in the name of, dominancy, in the name of acquiring enough cattle, and we encouraged them. For us, the strategy was to speak to the mothers, because we felt that the mothers are a great influence to these men and these young warriors, because the young warriors are the ones that are sent into battle. So we started with, we had a meal. The meal was organized for all to eat, have one meal, to eat one meal, because there was this, rumors that were circulated amongst these two tribes, dehumanizing the other people. It's saying that, the Lango are like this. Oh, the Didinga are not human beings. They are animals. They are savages. We need to, get rid of them. We need to fight them. So the reason why we got them to sit and eat together, for them to see that this is actually a human being like me. He eats food, he drinks water.
Which was the first tribe that you met the first time?
The first time we meet a tribe called the Didinga.
Okay. And so how did you even establish a meeting with the second tribe that they would even listen to you?
Yeah, so now there's these guys. There's a reverend father from another town that he was a member of, he's a tribeman of the Didinga, but he was working and living with the Lango, the other tribe. So we got in touch with him, and he connected the other tribes, the other tribe to and he spoke to, it took months for them to agree to come and meet.
Okay.
So he spoke to them for months, because for us, we had done our part. Our brother Paul Lotiki, who comes from the Didinga people, we had done our part through Paul Lotiki to encouraged the Didinga to come to this peace conference, to talk. And then there was also another group which is called Root of Generation that had also got involved in it. So we managed, after a long time of negotiations, we managed to get these two warring tribes in one place. And for us, our fear was that we were fearing that probably violence could erupt. Something small could cause, a small thing could cause violence to erupt. So we kept on praying and trusting that everything is going to go according, to plan. So we started this 3-day peace conference, and we got women to come and speak about the pain that they have endured, seeing their children dying, and others not burying their children because they are killed in battle, and their bodies are discredited, lit on fire. And so there was, every side was expressing their pain. For us, what we wanted is we wanted them to see and realize that if the Didinga feels pain, even the Lango feels pain. All of us feel the same pain, and this pain comes as a result of the violence. So we spoke to them and we told them that enough is enough with the killing. You need to agree to coexist. The other party has to coexist with their cattle, and you guys have to coexist with your cattle. You need to understand that it does not take away anything from you if you do not raid the other party, because it got to a point where it was tit for tat. Now it had stopped being cattle raiding, but it was tit for tat. You kill us, we kill you. You kill us. So we spent 3 days talking, us, me, myself, Bosco, Paul Lotiki, and then we have these guys from a Root of Generation. They come, we present to them, we talk to them, and then we use music as well as an instrument. And at the end of the day, we shared the gospel with them. We got them, we spoke to them and told them, look, we are all created in the image of God. Yes, we may be speaking different languages, but all of us are created in the image of God. All of us, bleed red blood. There's no much difference between us. You need, to understand that God wants us to coexist. We need to share, whatever resource that we have with one another.
And so, okay, so that was the end of 3 days then. And how long ago was that? When did that conference take place?
That is I'm talking about a year and a half ago now.
Okay, and so how have things evolved over that period of time?
I can tell you, Daniel, things have gone to better. They have become better. They have become better. And to tell you that they have become better, recently I received a message, from one of the people, the commissioners that was present when we were mediating the peace. And he wrote to us. He wanted us to go back there and in a different region to help bring, to mediate peace with us, other tribes, with another group set of tribes. So I can tell you there is a good precedent that was set. There is a good testimony. These people are living peacefully now. Recently Paul went back. He's actually there. Paul Lotik. He took his family back. Remember, he had run away from South Sudan. He had come to Uganda. But to show you that peace is reigning in that place now.
Amazing.
Paul took his family back, and as I speak to you right now, he's in South Sudan, in Chukudum. And so we just failed to go because of the resource that was needed for us, to be going there. So but I can tell you that things are moving in the right direction.
Well, certainly glad to hear that. And I'm just curious. So after that first harrowing trip where you could have been killed if God hadn't supernaturally placed the right person on the motorcycle that you had rented, what did you think on the trip coming back? And then other subsequent trips, what kind of precautions do you take in case, it's someone different next time?
Yeah. Funny. This is a funny story. So when we were coming back, I'd spent there close to a week. So when we were coming back, it was it was like I wanted to get home, because the last night that we were there, the lodge, the makeshift hotel that we were staying in, had no door. It had no door. So I spent most of the time that I spent there, I did not catch sleep because I was living in fear, you know. So when the day came for us to come back to Uganda, and I went back and spoke to the chiefs that had invited us and that we had, you know, meetings with, and we told them now we are going back. So we got on the motorbikes again and we started riding back. We started riding back for kilometers and kilometers. So when we come, and what is running in my mind is I'm thinking, am I going to come back here? Well, now I'm excited. My heart is excited because of what I've seen. We have planted a church.
Yeah.
You know, reconciliation. We have brought this, and I'm excited. I'm saying, well, am I going to come back or not? And I'm thinking, I should come back. I shouldn't be coming back here. I need to be coming back here. But then my other mind is telling me, no, you don't need to come back. Let this be the last time. Because, I mean, you never know what can happen if you come back. God has kept you safe this time around. When you get home, don't think about coming back. So we ride back. And when we crossed back to Uganda, again, there was no border side from South Sudan. It was like we were coming from nowhere, you know. So the soldiers that we had left in the side of Uganda saw us coming back. We are all muddy, you know, filled with mud. So they said, "Oh, so you have come back." So I can see the map that you're putting. There's a place called Capoeira. So this place is in that place called Capoeira. In there, that's where Chukudum is. So basically, we enter the south, the Uganda side, and the soldiers look at us and they say, "Wow, so you are alive? You've actually come back."
Oh man.
Yeah. So I tell them, "Yeah, we are back. We are alive." And they laugh and they tell us, "But you look like you have been in a cave. You know, you look like you've been playing in mud." We tell them, "Yeah, it doesn't matter whether we look like we've been playing in mud. We are back and we are alive." So I sat there at the military detach and I started reflecting, and I actually broke down. You know, I broke down.
Wow.
And because it became too emotional for me, you know, and I couldn't believe that I'm back, and I couldn't believe that we had done what we had done, you know. So I've gone back several more times since the first time I went there.
Wow.
And the last time I went, we went to a place called Lorema, and we have planted so far 5 churches in that region. We have planted 5 churches, and there's the last point where we planted a church. We had to walk on foot for over 9 hours. It's a 9-hour journey on foot. So we went to this place and where we planted this church, and I can tell you on the humanitarian part of it, this particular place, women are dying because there are no clinics for, you know, for maternity for mothers to give birth. So for me, when we were walking, you'd come across dead bodies of pregnant women, and there was this particular one that broke my heart. There was this young man, this man, and they were trying to get this woman on an 8-hour journey, on foot to go to the nearest place where they could receive medical, you know, service for this lady, this pregnant woman. And so she died, unfortunately, on the way. So for me, the part that broke my heart is looking at her son. He was around 8 years. He was seated next to the dead body of his mother, and he was crying. And I mean, there was nothing we could do about it, you know, only to try and comfort the man and the sister of this woman and the little boy. So a lot of things are happening there. There's a lot that needs to be done. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done. Clean water. You know, some people die of infectious, you know, waterborne diseases. And there's a lot that, you know, with the gospel as on the side, you know, moving along with the you know, the humanitarian bit of it.
Well, so I can actually see some people in our chat here are actually asking any ways that they can help. And for anyone who sees this video later, how can they help? Maybe you need some more relief supplies. Where can they send it? I think this website on the ground is vastgracemissions.org. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. So they can go to vastgracemissions.org and they will find the link where you can donate and stuff like that. Yeah, where you can donate, and then
Perfect. Well, yeah. So we strongly encourage anyone to do that. I have personally seen what some of these supplies can do, and you're a pastor, so you're working on their spiritual needs, but oftentimes, just like these horrific graphic images you just described here, there's a physical need as well. And if you can't get the people taken care of, then the spiritual part isn't even going to get addressed. So anyone who has an interest in helping further that operation, we invite you to go to vastgracemissions.org and help out. Well, I tell you, this is just an amazing story, and we're so grateful for the courage that you've shown and the willingness to be used by God and by man for the benefit of all, bringing peace, bringing spiritual grace. Yvonne, you're an amazing person, and honored to call you brother.
And I'm honored to call you brother, Daniel. I am.
And so we'll continue to follow this if there's any future developments, especially if you branch out to some of these other tribes and try to bring peace to more people over there. We're gonna, you can count on our prayer support and other support too. And we hope to catch up with you soon.
Yeah. Yes. And I'll be in touch. And there's a lot that we are planning, and I'm actually planning to travel to Juba, most likely on the 11th. We are going to a place called Sherekat, and in Sherekat we want to go and establish places where we want to go and do looking at drilling a well there, and then preach the gospel and plant a church in that particular area.
Awesome. That's terrific. Well, we'll be praying for that very outcome. And we thank you for joining us today. This has been a little bit different than our normal deep dives here, but it just shows that there are things going on all over the world. There are amazing people all over the world. And we love to be able to highlight those stories, especially when it's somebody's doing something really good for people like this one here with my friend Yvonne in Africa. Thank you very much for joining us. We remain unintimidated and uncompromised and can bring you the truth, and you can continue to count on it. We got some great shows coming up for you also tomorrow, and next week we'll see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.